Depending on how the government's stance will change in the future, right now it is very unlikely that Russia will join the European Union, due to it being very corrupt and undemocratic. In order to be able to join the EU, Russia needs to become a solid democracy and follow the EU's values and laws. Right now, with the situation of the Russia-Ukraine war, the possibility of such a thing happening is even extended further down into the future. But if the war ends and somehow the authoritarian regime Putin has set up in the country dissolves and a big push towards democracy is created, then maybe 3 to 4 decades down the future, and who knows, maybe even sooner, Russia might have created positive ties with the European Union, embracing the EU instead of opposing it. As things are right now, with China and the United States splitting the world in two, there will come a time probably close to the end of this century that integration of Russia into the European Union will be inevitable and mandatory for both powers to be able to compete on the world scale. In his first years at the head of Russia, Vladimir Putin mentioned several times this possibility, which he considered excellent from a strategic point of view for the European Union and Russia. With the partial exemption of France, especially in the past, the whole ideal behind European unification is the realization that European countries cannot count by themselves in the world and that differences between them are not that great after all. The day Russia joins the EU is the day that the EU will truly have fulfilled its purpose. The EU's greatest goal is to ensure peace, stability and prosperity in Europe. And for that, Russia, which is Europe's largest country and biggest military power, is absolutely essential. There can be no true peace or stability without Russia's cooperation. We can't forget that there is no incompatibility between Russians and Europeans on a cultural level, no worse than between some other member states when they first joined. After all, Russia proper is an actual European country inhabited by Europeans. As mentioned earlier, the main problems that are currently stopping Russia from joining the EU is a stable democracy and corruption. That problem, though, is not on a surface level, but deeply embedded in Russia's government. That is the main reason many people believe Russia will never be able to change and come closer to the EU's requirements. Never is a very long time, though, as things change on the global scale, with Russia becoming weaker and weaker by the day as stats show, and the performance they have put up in Ukraine solidifies the fact that Russia is a power of the past, and the new upcoming superpower fight is going to be between the United States of America and China, leaving Russia behind. When that realization takes place down the decades, there will come a time in which Russia will be the one asking the EU to join it. Many say that Russia is too influential for the EU. Well, first of all, it has to be noted that as of 2022, Germany's economy alone is twice as big as of that of Russia's, and in fact France's and Italy's economies are bigger as well. Others say the population is too big to handle, as Russia has 140 million residents. Again, we can't forget the fact that France and Germany, which have very strong ties working together, working pretty much as one regulating the European Union, have a combined population of 150 million residents. Now, it is obvious that such an integration would bring a lot of fear, which in turn would in a sense force France and Germany to come even closer when combating Russia inside the EU when it comes to regulating laws. Now, on the other hand though, the sheer geographical behemoth Russia is going to pose a big problem for the EU, because if Russia joins, that would mean it would become 5 times bigger than its previous size, as Russia is 4 times bigger as the EU is currently. In addition, that would mean that the EU would border China, North Korea, and pretty much Alaska, which is crazy to think about. Furthermore, down the line, that could give the chance for the EU to exert more of its power in Asia, coming head to head with China, something that the United States would support. Now let's say hypothetically that all the problems stopping Russia from joining the European Union magically disappear down the future and a unification between the two becomes a reality. What would that mean for Europe's future and what benefits would it bring? Well, first of all, exploitation of resources in Siberia are going to be much easier to extract with the EU funding Russia's effort, which in turn would provide all of the EU with cheap and clean Russian gas. Something that as of now seems very far-fetched, to be honest, with the current situation of Russia cutting the supplies to Europe and a sanctioned war taking place between them. But again, that doesn't mean much. Taking a quick look into history, for example, if you told someone in Europe in the 40s that Germany would pretty much be your biggest ally 70 years down the road, they would have called you crazy. But that is how history works, and there is nothing to say that the same thing could not happen between the West and Russia, especially with China pushing its global agenda. Anyways, going back to the benefits, the EU's population would skyrocket from 447 million to just under 600 million. It would also mean Europe's GDP would increase from 16.6 trillion US dollars to 18 trillion, marking its spot as the second or third largest economy globally, depending on how far China would have come by then. Easier cross-continental movement would also take place in such a world, with a Schengen area extending inside Russia, which would signify the abolishment of their internal borders with the EU, allowing free, unrestricted movement of people in harmony with common rules for controlling external borders and fighting criminality by strengthening the common judicial system and police cooperation. Furthermore, such a union would mean no more nuclear threats between the two, as ties between them would become stronger, merging them into one bigger economy. Adding to the EU's effort to support Russia in the Asian side of their country, there would be a substantial expansion to their economic influence in the east, possibly supplying Asian countries with raw resources that could come from Siberia or from the American state of Alaska, as transcontinental movement of supplies between the US and Russia would become easier than ever. Anyways, apart from all these benefits, I understand that such a reality is really optimistic and possibly sounds too good to be true. But again, we can't deny the fact that if Russia somehow overcomes their ego and their grudge against the EU and the US, such a unification would be in the best interest of all three in the coming decades. Well, that was it, guys. If you enjoyed this video and found it informative, please let me know down below by leaving a like, sharing it with your friends, and maybe even a comment on what I should cover next. You're free to dislike the video if you found it misleading, and even correct me if something I shared with you was misinformation. Again, thank you for watching, and see you again on the next video. Until then, have a great day.